The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
The Tigers take care of West Virginia, and LSU is Omaha bound.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
LSU, for the 20th time in program history, off to the College World Series. LSU dispatching West Virginia 12-5 in a game that had a smidge of drama in the middle, but by and large, this was a coronation. 1 run in the first, a 5 spot in the second, which we'll get to. West Virginia did put up 4 runs in the middle to make it 6-4, but then the Tigers explode for a 6 spot in the 7th. And after that, it was all over, but the shouting, it was just a formality from that point. And the Tiger bullpen took care of business with Cooper Williams and Chase Shores behind Anthony Ianson. Cooper Williams, Chase Shores were sensational in this game on a day where Ianson struggled. He was still very good, but by his standard that he set, wasn't great. Maybe that's something that's super encouraging for LSU as you do head off to Omaha, as you realize, man, you won 2 games in lopsided fashion in a super regional round where Anderson and Ianson weren't their best. And when you can win, when Anderson and Ianson aren't their best, you can beat anybody in the country. I know West Virginia wasn't exactly the most formidable foe in this super regional or in this field, but LSU emphatically beat them in 2 days. And that was a team that won 44 games this year. It was very comfortable playing on the road. So Tigers win. They advance to the College World Series, 20th time in program history. Jay Johnson, his second time in 4 years at LSU and looking for his second national championship. We got a lot to do here over the show. I'll give you my takeaways from the game. We'll run through the game, set up Omaha a little bit, how the bracket's going to look. So we're going to get to all of that. We're thrilled to have you aboard with us here. So please smash that like button if you would, and subscribe to the channel if you're with us here live on Locked On LSU. Okay, let me give you a couple of my big takeaways. Obviously, I think the thing most people coming into this game had asked me was, what do you think Jay's going to do with the lineup after the big change in game 1? I think the feeling we all had was he was going to go back. Game 1, you were facing a lefty. After Pearson in the leadoff spot, he was stacking righties, and it worked. It forced their starter, Griffin Kern, out of the game. But what you saw today, I think, is more like what you're going to see. You had Curiel, Fry, Milam, who's really found it now. Brown, Jones, Dickinson. Reeves got the start at third over Braswell, then Hernandez and Stanfield. A couple of takeaways very quickly. On a day where Ethan Fry went 0 for 5 with 2 strikeouts and you still put up a dozen runs, that's a pretty good day. And I think if nothing else, what that speaks to is just how deep this lineup is. I know. Over the last month of the regular season, it was a giant concern. It was a giant talking point that we all had because they did struggle. And if you're an everydayer and you're with us, shout out. I love you. One of the things we talked about a lot was it's one thing to struggle against Liam Doyle or against guys that Ryan Prager from Texas A&M, guys that are legit number 1 aces. When LSU was struggling with midweek freshman arms from Ole Miss, like that's a little more of a red flag. So I understood it, but that's also part and parcel with baseball. I mean, Jared Jones had a 2 for 20 streak. He's clearly busted out of that. He's much more comfortable at the plate. Stephen Milam this year in league play is hitting 200. Like Stephen Milam say this out loud. Stephen Milam's hitting 200 in conference play this year. He's obviously much better than a 200 hitter, and he's showing it now. But you've been able to overcome that throughout the course of this season. So all that to say, even on a day like this where Ethan Fry was 0 for 5, it just didn't matter because you hit up and down the lineup. And it was Daniel Dickinson was 0 for 5 with 2 strikeouts. So Fry and Dickinson were combined 0 for 10 with 4 strikeouts, and you still put up a dozen runs on 10 hits, and you left 10 men on base. Curiel was awesome. Led off the game with a double, which was just so impressive. Got you started off on the right foot. He comes home on the fielder's choice that Brown hit, and of course you exploded in the second, which we'll run through the game flow here in a second. Milam for the day, 2 for 4, 4 RBI, 2 doubles, walked twice. So Milam was on base 4 times. Jake Brown, 2 for 4 day, where he had a couple of knocks. Of course, the massive home run to center field. He was also hit by a pitch. So 4 RBI for Milam, 4 RBI for Jake Brown. And then Chris Stanfield with what was the exhale knock in the 7th when they went to Bessinger, who is their best reliever. It was a 6-4 ball game. We're all a little apprehensive. Their pitcher, Meyer, had kind of settled into a groove. And after the pop-up drops, and then he walks the guy on 4 pitches, hits Luis Hernandez when everybody thought they were going to bunt. And you know how I feel about it. Ultimately, you don't give a pitcher who's struggling and out. He plunks him in the back. They go to Bessinger and Stanfield. Boom. One of the things I loved about that Stanfield AB in the 7th, loved about the Stanfield at bat in the 7th. It's 6-4. It feels tense. You still got a 2-run lead, but it feels tense. We all know there's been bullpen issues. You still need 9 more outs. It's a 2-run game. You hadn't scored since the 2nd. And in that situation, Stanfield's up with runners on 2nd and 3rd and less than 2 outs. What you have to do is get the ball either in the air to the outfield or on the ground to the right side. Like, that is your job. That is approach. That is team baseball. That is your job. You're not there to hit a home run. Your job is to get that run home from 3rd. And what did Chris Stanfield do? He shortened up and he slapped the ball on the ground to the right side. The infield was playing in, trying to cut down the run at the plate, and he smoked it right through, or slapped it. I shouldn't really smoke it, but he slapped it right through the infield. 2-run score, and all of a sudden, boom, it's 8-4, and everybody exhales. So I thought it was a huge moment in the game for Chris Stanfield. So all that to say, I think that it was a great team win for LSU in totality here, to go out there on days when Ianson didn't have his best, when some of your key offensive players weren't at their best in this ballgame as well, and you still find a way to go win 12-5, punch your ticket to Omaha. It just shows how complete this team can be. You know, for all the conversation we've had about the bullpen struggles throughout the course of this season, you know, the other thing we've talked about is shortening up that bullpen. You know, finding the guys, the handful of guys that you can count on. After Anderson, Ianson, who are the 4 or 5 guys out of the bullpen that you know you're going to count on, and LSU seems to have identified those, and Cooper Williams was awesome in this game, who we just have to praise Cooper Williams for the job he did. On a day where Ianson went 5 innings and struck out 7, 4 runs on 5 hits, walked 3. It just wasn't his best. He really labored through 104 pitches. I even wrote down after the 3rd, Ianson was at 51 pitches, and it was just, and he came up with a huge strikeout to end the 3rd. It left runners on 2nd and 3rd, by the way, in that situation. It was big to throw up a 0 after your big 5-run second. But man, Ianson really labored, needed 104 pitches to get through 5 innings, and they went to Cooper Williams, and he gave you 2 2/3, and the only thing he gave up was that mammoth home run in the 7th when it was, in the 8th to make it 12-5. Which was, at that point, it was all over but the shouting. And then, of course, Chase Shores went out there, was dominant, faced 4 hitters, struck out 3 of them. So Tigers win. LSU is off to Omaha.
Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
All right, so if you missed the news yesterday, or was it the day before? I don't know. The days all blur together in my head, quite frankly, this time of year and most of the year. I rarely know what day of the week it is. That is 100% accurate. You can call me on Wednesday morning and I don't know what day. I'm either working that day or I'm golfing. Those are the only days that click in my head. Work day, golf day, or sometimes it's both. Anyway, so the House v. NCAA settlement came down. Judge Claudia Wilkin ruled that the NCAA has to pay a bunch of back payments to athletes that should have gotten money over the years but weren't allowed to because of the amateurism rule enforced by the NCAA, which the courts have routinely said, yeah, this is illegal. You can't do that. And so that's all going away. That opened the door for NIL. Now, the House settlement allows athletic departments this year, this upcoming school year, 2025-2026, rosters will get cut down and athletes will be paid $20.5 million spread across the department. Now, how it gets spread across the department depends on the school. Some might go for, a 75% to football, 15 men's basketball, 5 women's basketball, and 5% everywhere else. Some might go directly proportional to the revenue generated by each sport in relation to how much money the athletic department wants to give to its athletes. Either way, that I suspect, since it just got issued by the judge, though it hasn't directly been challenged on Title IX grounds, I bet you there will be a Title IX question in there. Because certainly that will not be an equitable distribution of funds between men's and women's sports, because football makes most of the revenue. Does that mean the money should automatically go straight to football? That argument can certainly be made. So I'm waiting to see that. I don't have as big of a question there. I think having a salary cap overall, if I take off my Oregon hat for a moment, it is good for the sport of college football. To make things closer to a level playing field, it will never be perfectly level. It will not. College sports will never get to that particular point. And I don't think that it should, because schools that are able to raise more money and are willing to spend that money should be rewarded. What you don't want to have is a situation like you have in Major League Baseball, where all the teams are in the same league, sure, but the Dodgers' payroll is over $300 million a year, and there are teams that are not even paying $100 million a year for their roster. Moneyball is a great movie, but it doesn't represent a viable long-term successful plan to operate a league where money is changing hands like that. The NFL is a much better situation where there is a salary cap and you can spend into the luxury tax to go, over that cap. I don't know exactly how all the rules work, but you can do that, but it is much, much closer from one school to the next than it is in college sports or in Major League Baseball. So, and the NBA, I think, has the luxury tax as well. But the interesting thing that I think for Oregon could be more of a downside than an upside, but again, for college football is good, is the NIL collective angle. So any NIL deal, there's going to be a new college sports commission, and they're calling this NIL Go, where Deloitte, one of the big four accounting firms, has been contracted to evaluate all deals between student athletes and third-party NIL collectives, not payments that are coming from the athletic department, which are now legal via the House v. NCAA settlement, but Division Street, Oregon's NIL collective, would not be able to just go out and say, we're going to pay whatever we want for, let's just say hypothetically, I'm speaking purely hypothetically, I'm not reporting anything, but let's say Derek Harmon cost $1 million last year. That's obviously well over $600. And so if Oregon's NIL collective, which won't go away, but it'll just have to go through this review process, if they want to go and say, we're going to pay Derek Harmon $1 million to come play for Oregon this year, Deloitte might come back and say, no, that we don't deem that to be fair market value. You can't give him that much money. And so the idea behind that is to cut down on the number of pay for play opportunities or to eliminate them. And I don't know that you can ever get to that particular point, but the idea again is to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. And Oregon has certainly been a have in the NIL and portal world. And so if that holds up legally, that's a big time game changer for roster construction, because now, the bidding wars that people hate so much are going to exist, but at a smaller level, because Deloitte will be able to say, yeah, okay, you're offering to pay $3 million for a corner. Yeah, a corner is not worth $3 million. How they're getting that valuation, I'm not entirely sure. But for any prospects out there Oregon's gotten because they had more NIL, now they're going to have to go make a more holistic pitch. Now, do I think that Oregon has been exclusively recruiting well because of NIL? Absolutely, positively not. No. And one thing that I have said repeatedly is that across all the changes to the landscape of college athletics, Oregon has adapted correctly and thrived. That has continuously been true. When it was, how do you get Oregon on the national stage? Let's wear fancy uniforms, and everybody's talking about, yeah, that worked pretty well. Then there was a facilities race, and Oregon was right there. And Oregon continued with the uniform game. And NIL came about, and Oregon was ready to be a tier 1 school. And the portal came about, and Oregon crushes it. And Oregon needed to up their recruiting, and they did that. All these changes over the years. Oregon has continuously adapted and succeeded. So while you can certainly make the argument that top tier NIL schools like Oregon, Ohio State, SMU has an incredibly well-funded collective, USC has been falling into this category recently. While you can certainly argue that those schools are going to have to do things differently, it doesn't mean they aren't still the best position to succeed. It just means the high-end amount of dollars, again, if it holds up in court, because the courts have consistently said, yeah, you can't cap the earning potential of the student athletes just because they're playing under the banner of NCAA athletics. They are adults, and you can't do this in any other field. Why are you able to do it here? So that case still has to be made in order to limit what the NIL collectives can do. But the attempt to get rid of pay for play and to get rid of, boosters having so much influence over the construction of college rosters could very well be on its way. It is here. Like any NIL deal struck starting now, even though NIL Go doesn't officially launch until Wednesday, June 11th, that deal that would be struck between now and that, like, let's say Dante Moore wanted to renegotiate his NIL deal right now with Division Street for whatever reason. That now has to go through NIL Go and Deloitte for their review to say, no, you can't give him that much money. But I think deals that have already been put in place get to stay grandfathered in, which is why there were so many deals that were pushed to get they were pushing to get through. By they, I mean everybody in college athletics behind the scenes. They were trying to get him through because they knew this was coming down, and suddenly there were going to be restrictions. So is it great for Oregon? Not necessarily, because the NIL was a way for them to create an advantage over certain other schools. However, as I've stated repeatedly, Oregon is not solely an NIL recruiter. They do not have unlimited NIL, and whatever situation college sports wants to be in, Oregon's going to succeed. They didn't get Jackson Cantwell. You know why? Because Miami had a bigger NIL offer. Well, guess what? That NIL offer might not now be allowed to get up to $2.5 million for a kid who hasn't taken a snap of college football yet beyond high school. They might say, yeah, you can offer like $200,000, but you can't go to $2.5 million or anything like that. But wherever the limits are, Oregon's going to be able to reach them. So my recruiting expectations don't change at all. But again, with the NIL collective factor, wait and see if that holds up in court, because I have serious questions about whether it will.
The NBA Finals are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. FanDuel makes betting easy. Whether it's picking your favorite teams or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals, there's so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. You can place that first $5 bet on who you think will win the NFL Rookie of the Year. Travis Hunter is 9-1 to win the offensive award, but 10-1 to win the defensive award as well. I would probably take both of those. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies.
We got to talk some basketball after Desmond Claude committed to Washington, because this just raises all of the expectations that we have for Danny Sprinkle and this basketball team this season. Desmond Claude, this past year at USC, led the team in scoring with 15.1 points per game, also led them in assists, and I believe it was 4.2 per contest. So this is a really high-impact wing guy with 1 year of eligibility remaining, who's just going to step in and start right away for this roster. And this was the piece that we've been talking about for a while in terms of Washington needs one more high-end wing guy to round out this roster. And this is just a fantastic addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously anytime you can grab the number one player available in the portal, even as we get into the later stages here, and grab a guy that led a Big Ten team in scoring as you enter your second year in the Big Ten. Obviously USC is also, but anytime that you can grab a guy like that to kind of fill the one hole that we kind of had still for as far as the starting five goes on this basketball team, I think you feel pretty good about that. And I think Claude fits in really well with what Danny Sprinkle and the Huskies want to do on offense, especially. Claude is more of a primary ball handler for USC, but I think he's going to move a little bit off the ball, gives you a little bit more versatility in terms of anyone can initiate offense now, whether it's going to be him or Wesley Yates or Kamari Peterson or Zoom Diallo. All of those guys are capable of initiating the offense. And I think that gives you a lot more versatility than they've had this last season in Sprinkle's first year.
Absolutely. And it's something where, you can talk about his defense and just say he's also a really high level defender, which is something that I don't want to say this team desperately lacked last year, because we saw guys like Tyler Harris really improve on that end of the floor throughout the season. But it's just something where it's very clear that team was just not experienced enough to get the job done. As whatever our expectations might have been for them going into the year last year, as the season played out, it was okay. It was very obvious where the holes were on that roster. And now we look at this one, all of those holes are kind of gone. And it's something where, we look at what the recruitment process was for this final edition, right? Where it was supposed to be, one of these big time guys, whether there are a whole bunch of guys that ended up going elsewhere, where if Darian Williams was a target at one time. I just think about all the different names just kind of in that mold of Danny Sprinkle really wanted to go out and just have one of these high impact guys at the position for 1 year. Ty Grant Foster was another one who ended up signing with Gonzaga. But I kind of look at this position as a whole, and this is everything that, I feel like people, and myself included, I was really high on him, expected Tyler Harris to be moving forward. But obviously, with him going elsewhere, it was, okay, who's going to step into this role? And I think Danny Sprinkle has just done such a masterful job of improving this roster in multiple ways, where it's not all hinging on one person like it was with Great Osmore last year. And, you look at just all the different roles that you're going to see from just this projected starting five that you did a fantastic job writing about over on Huskies Wire, where right now it's Kamari Peterson, Wesley Yates, Desmond Claude. I was like, wait, hold on. Who am I missing here? Jacob Ognisevich and Frank Kepnon. So you got 4 transfers in there, and I'm sure some people are going to look at that and say, oh, that's a little concerning, because we saw the chemistry be a little off last year with that many new faces on the roster. But this just feels different.
Yeah, I think for sure. I think there's probably some valid concern there, especially you have a lot of guys that are used to being offense initiators, being sort of the focal point of an offense, right? Where Ognisevich and Peterson are both conference players of the year last year. Yeah. Obviously, we talked about Claude led USC in scoring. Yates led all Big Ten freshmen in scoring during conference play last season. All of these guys are used to getting their own shots off. And so how they work within the system is going to be something to watch, certainly. But at the same time, you have such a good mix of experienced guys with some more youth than you had last year, where last year it was the team was just so inexperienced kind of all overall. And the grad transfers that they did bring in didn't really provide the impact that they were really looking for. And so you kind of got a team that was kind of figuring it all out on the fly while also learning how to play college basketball.
Yeah.
And with this team, like you're figuring it all out on the fly, but it's all guys that have played 2, 3, 4 years of college basketball already. They know the environment. They know what they're getting into. You're grabbing guys that have NCAA tournament experience, that have Big Ten experience. Like you're right. It does just feel different this time around.
So I want to go back to one of the things you said, which I think is a really great point. You talk about the questions about how they're all going to work in the system. And I think that's one of the most important points when you talk about Desmond Claude, where you mentioned it. You said he's a primary ball handler, as you know, who led the team in assists at USC last year. And that's something that I just don't think we saw last year when, you know, there were certain rotations on just a certain lineup on the floor, I would say, where you didn't have a second guy who really looked like a distributor. Where when Great Osborne did that, it looked fantastic. And there were different points in time where it just felt like he didn't have that help around him, where I think Zoom Diallo is going to be a phenomenal player. I don't want that to sound like I'm knocking him in any way, shape, or form, because I think he's going to get there, but he was a true freshman. And as Danny Sprinkle said it numerous times last season, those mistakes were going to happen, careless turnovers, different things like that are just, you know, by definition, a freshman mistake. And that's not going to be a problem anymore this year. And it's great that, you know, Claude can just kind of tie this all together, because one thing that you omitted for no reason other than it wasn't part of the conversation, Kumari Peterson, Wesley Yates, and Jacob Ognisevich all shot over 40% behind 3-point line last year, which was something this team was just absolutely abysmal at throughout last year. And just seeing those improvements and having two guys in Kumari Peterson and Desmond Claude in the starting five, plus Zoom Diallo, JJ Mandaquit, whoever else you want to say can be a ball handler coming off the bench, adding all of those guys in as well is just going to continue to elevate this roster.
Yeah, it's like what you were talking about earlier, right? Where it doesn't feel like there's one focal point on this team like there was last year with Great, right? Where if Peterson gets into foul trouble or Desmond Claude gets into foul trouble or something like that during the course of a game, you are not suddenly like without a ball handler and an offense initiator for the rest of that time until they come back into the game, right? Like you have someone that is a member of the starting five already that you can sort of have be the primary ball handler. You can bring another wing in off the bench. You can bring Diallo in off the bench. You can bring Mandaquit in off the bench. Like you have so many different options now to get into your offense and to spread the ball around and get it to those guys that are, you know, shooting 40% from three and really like just ride the hot hand kind of every game. And that's the way that successful teams, especially in college basketball, are built. It's very rare that a team is built around just like one guy. And those are the teams that make like a super deep run, you know, unless like that guy is Cooper Flagg, right? But like, you know, but like none of those guys are that level of talent. Obviously, all of these guys are great, and we're very excited for them to suit up for Washington. But none of them are going to be Cooper Flagg. That's just is what it is.
It's unfair expectations.
Right? Yeah, exactly. And so, like, to have that many guys that can initiate the offense and can get hot any night and like distribute the ball and get the ball to the right place, get the ball to the right hand, I think is going to give you a lot more consistency night to night that than we saw last season, which was a huge problem for them last season.